Okay.
Good morning, everyone on here live and anyone watching here afterwards. We're on our second session of fostering your kids' educational, emotional, and spiritual growth. Yesterday, we heard a lot from Heather Schilling, who is a homeschool veteran, and she shared a ton of great tips. And we really got into a great discussion of what homeschooling and distance learning and kind of how you can just manage your schedule. So if you're watching this later, I encourage you to go back and watch session one. Session two, we are going to be talking about why do kids of the same parents act so differently. And I think I can speak for most parents of multiple children. I have three, and each one of them is different. I have to parent them differently. I have to react to things differently with them, and I have to teach them differently. So we're going to be hearing a lot from Robert Bryan. So Robert, would you like to take over?
I don't want to take over, but I will be glad to start. We'll go from there. Uh, Good morning, everyone, and thank you for those of you who will be watching afterwards. Uh, Quickly, let's look at our kids and how they learn. The first slide will tell us that there are ways we receive information. One of those is visual. Some students learn, some kids learn, and they've got to see it. They've got to read it. They've got to have it in front of their face before they can see it. Heather mentioned yesterday that one of her sons, however, is auditory. He wants to hear it, and he may be able to read it, but it'd be far better if it were read to him, maybe reading it, seeing it at the same time, but auditory is the way he learns. He's got to say it, and a good technique with him would be to have him tell it back and that kind of thing. The third one is tactile, and this is the most difficult for me to understand, but they've got to touch it. They've got to build something or collect a leaf or touch the bark or something that involves touching it. But we're also all built a little bit differently in the way we process information. And one of those is that we process information, some of us, from a global viewpoint. We want to see the big picture. The important thing is not the details. And when the algebra teacher says we need to memorize this equation, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, the global person says, I'm never going to use that. Where does that fit in? How in the world can I use that kind of information? You can't add letters. And the other person is a more linear way of processing information. The linear person, just give me the next step. Just show me the next step. You might compare a global person to someone who wants to see the map of the whole trip. He wants to see all the towns. He wants to see the whole picture. And then he can decide, okay, what route are we going to take? The linear person turns on the GPS and he's quite content to say, okay, I turn left at the next street, or I turn right at the next street. And they don't worry so much about the end result. They're worried about the next step to be taken. And so if we understand that some of the kids we're working with, and perhaps our spouses as well, and the people we work with in school or wherever, some of them are very global. They want to see the big picture. And if we go in and present just the details, they're lost. And then some are very linear. And if we go in and talk about the big picture without including the details, they're lost. So we learn how to work around that and how to accommodate. Now, the biggest part of what we want to talk about today is what is the personality style of these various individuals. I say this now. If you are watching this afterwards, please do not repost this. It's not because we don't want it known, but because of copyright issues. I am a certified consultant with Personality Insights, and these are their slides. And so I would not have the right to tell you to repost them if you could just do that. First question is, am I outgoing or am I more reserved? Are my kids more outgoing or are they more reserved? That is what drives them. Next slide. The outgoing person is going to be more active. They're going to move with higher energy. Their gestures are going to show more passion, I think is the word that will come um, in what they're doing. They are the kind that are, they want to be with people. If you can click that twice, Natalie, I think the words will go up. I hope they will. There you go. They show more passion. But the more reserved person is going to speak more quietly, less forcefully. Uh, they're the ones that are going to raise their hands like this. The outgoing are going to raise their hands like this. And the outgoing are going to say, hey, hey, me, me, me. And the reserved are going to say, like this. They're going to be more guarded. They're going to be oftentimes more patient and probably research seems to indicate that somewhere between 10 and 20% of most of the challenges and the conflicts between people come from one of them being outgoing and the other being reserved. And sometimes that's the case. But usually, with a little bit of understanding, conflicts in this area can be resolved. I think the next slide talks about it being faster paced. The outgoing it's more involved. They're more energetic. Oftentimes, they're more optimistic. They're more positive. They're going to be enthusiastic, and if there's a problem, they want to get right into it. Let's solve the problem, and they want to talk things out. They want to work things out. They want to just get moving. For a very outgoing person, I have a friend who's very outgoing, and honestly, if he has to spend 24 hours at the house with his wife, and he loves his wife, no problem there, but just with his wife and no other contact with people, he goes crazy. He's got to have people. But those of us who are more reserved, we're a little bit slower paced. When we go to the grocery store, it is not a challenge to see if we can get through faster this time than we did last time. We can take our time, and if we need to stop and talk to somebody, well, okay, that's fine. They're often more cautious. They will be concerned about other people. Many times they take the time to think. Critical thinking doesn't mean they are thinking in a manner which is critical of the other person, but they reflect on things. And oftentimes they are more discerning. They try to think things through. They want to work things through. They're by nature, they're more gentle and they're more reserved. They're just quieter. In a room, there will be some people that'll be talking loudly over here. They're the outgoing. And then there's someone that may be sitting in a chair, maybe having a quiet conversation, or maybe not speaking to anyone. And that's okay. They're just the more reserved. Okay, now let's look at the other half of that circle on the next slide. Let me ask with 4 here, where do you put yourself? Outgoing or reserved? I'm not using extroverted and introverted because of all the baggage that goes with that. Because sometimes there are things attached to introversion or extroversion, which are not the subject of conversation here. But would you say I'm more outgoing or I'm more reserved? I'm sorry.
I think
there you go,
me,
Rachel.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you were cutting
Okay.
out. Can you repeat that question that we
Yeah.
asked?
Would you say, well, it might be 51%, 49, but I think I'm more outgoing, or I think I'm probably more reserved?
Probably more outgoing. Yeah.
Okay, good, good. And Natalie, you were speaking. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I'm actually very much reserved, but I'm outgoing for my job simply because I have to be. But I'm uncomfortable at every single point in that outgoing sense. I'm much more comfortable being reserved and quiet and not talking to anybody.
Heather, what about you?
Well, you know the answer, but I'll answer for everybody that doesn't know me. So I'm definitely outgoing, and Nathan is reserved. And they say opposites attract, and so we balance each other pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I myself am like you, Natalie. I am more reserved, but the ministry responsibilities, I function often in a much more outgoing fashion. But for those of you outgoing, Heather, Rachel, okay, understand that at the end of the day, Natalie and me, we need some quiet time. We need some time to ourselves. We need to be able to drop back and to have interaction. We don't feed on interaction. Whereas for you, being with people energizes you. It drains Natalie and me.
It wears me out.
Dana.
Which, like my best friend is like that.
Dana, would you consider yourself probably a little more outgoing or a little more reserved?
No, I'm like you and Natalie. It's because the situation deems it, but I'm okay being on an island reading a book for the next year. Like, I'm okay with it. Like, I kind of wish cell phones weren't invented.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I like people, but it's kind of draining. It's a little draining.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like I've been like training my whole life for this quarantine. I'm like, this is fine. Keep it going.
Yeah. For all the outgoing people, quarantine was, it was awful. And for all of us reserved people, hey, this is cool.
Yep.
I see that in my oldest child. I'm like, hey, let's go do this. This is fun, or this, and he is loving this. He loves the slowness of it and the calmness, and he, so I see that in my children, their personality traits. So necessarily, this has been a good lesson. Not what's necessarily fun for me is really going to be fun for him. So this has been a really good lesson for me, that I need to slow myself down so that I can allow them to be them, So.
Exactly. And Rachel, very, very good point. And we'll get to that even a little more clearly later. Now, outgoing, reserved. Now, the second question is, what's your compass, what's your focus? Are you more task-oriented, or are you more people-oriented? Okay, let's look at that. Next slide, I think, gives us some ideas about these. The task-oriented people tend to be focused on the job, and you can click one more time. I'm sorry, Natalie. They are less influenced by the opinions of others, and they're more logic-based in their approach. Some of the rest of us may not see that logic, but to them it's logical. But they've got their focus strictly on the goal. This is the job. Let's get it done. People-oriented, they enjoy the company, and people are the priority. Now, neither one of these is better than the other. And I'll emphasize this throughout. Neither one is better. Neither one is worse. They're just different. But and no, I shouldn't say but, and people who are task-oriented can be wonderful leaders. People who are people-oriented can be wonderful leaders. They just do it from a different starting point. People are the priority rather than the project for the people-oriented people. And they are more influenced by the opinions of others. They also are more emotional. You know, if a task-oriented, a strong task-oriented person, if it's some kind of critical input, okay, and they'll go on. But the person who is people-oriented, critical input, if it's given in a harsh manner, can really be devastating because they're more sensitive. Now, here's the thing. 80 to 90% of conflicts between people happen here, on whether the task is the goal or whether the people are the goal. In the Ivory Coast, I was director of a publishing house for 12 years. One of those years, we were in the States. We had a man come in who served as interim director for a year. I happened to be very more people-oriented. He was extremely task-oriented. And we'll get more to this in a moment. He realized there was a financial problem. I realized it too. My word, we'd been working on it for 6 months. But when I was gone, he was there. He said, okay, this is the way it is. And he fired 8% of the personnel. And it was no big deal. Me might have come to the same conclusion, but I would have agonized over firing 80% of the personnel. Because for me, yeah, we got to keep the place solvent, we got to keep it going, but what about the people? Okay, that's the difference. And this is where the biggest percentage of the conflicts come. Okay, next slide, Natalie, please. As you look at this, now we've got the, well, let's look at this. Task-oriented. They like programs, they like plans, they like projects. They generally like processes. They want to get things done. Whereas the people-oriented would say, no, relationships, that's what's important. And you know, emotions play a role. For the task-oriented person, they have emotions. They're not devoid of emotions, but emotions play very little role in decision-making. For people-oriented, emotions can play a big role in decision-making. Focuses on the opinions of others and how others are going to feel. If I do this, how's it going to affect this person or my relationship with that person? Okay, second question. Megan, I don't know if we can hear you. I'm glad you're there. But second question. Look at it. Would you say I probably am a little bit more task-oriented than people-oriented, or I'm a little bit more people-oriented than task-oriented? What would you say? Who's going to be the brave one to speak first?
I will.
Okay.
So I am the strangest combination of these two. I like when it's time to get something done, I want to get it done. But I love people so much. I'm all for plans and programs and to be efficient, but I just love people, but I'm not really swayed by the opinions of others. I mean, unless it's my husband, you know, if somebody's super close, I'm just not really swayed by that. So okay, I'm a weird combination.
No, you're a beautiful combination. Oh, that's a great combination. It really is. Rachel, what do you think? Where do you play yourself? You're not locking yourself in for life here either. Just what do you think?
I'm people oriented. I think as I get older, my mid 40s, the opinions of others don't really, I think that was age. When I look back at myself younger, I think maybe so, but definitely people oriented, you know, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a fall back down. My husband's real program plans and all that. And so, like you said, opposites attract, but probably people for sure oriented.
Okay. Dana, where would you place yourself?
I'm kind of like Heather. I'm a mix just because of my background. I have seen the benefit of being people orientated, but I'm understanding their feelings and emotions to get tasks accomplished. So where one person may operate, I need to talk about my feelings, or I need to know what the root of this is to get a task accomplished. Whereas I can adjust myself to somebody who needs A, B, and C done. But me, myself, I'm a task-oriented person. I need to get stuff done because you're always checking that list off.
Okay. Natalie, where would you place yourself?
I am very, very task oriented. Again, it's been an odd career choice for me to be in ministry because it's just very uncomfortable most of the times. In fact, I've realized in the last year that, I'm a person, I've got a checklist every day, and I got to accomplish this. And I've learned that in ministry, I can make a list of maybe what I want to do in a month, but I can't do it on a day-to-day basis. There's been days where I get a call from a parent or a volunteer, and they need that people side of ministry. And it's uncomfortable. I do not understand emotions. I am not an emotional person. So it's very difficult for me to empathize and do that, but I am trying. But task oriented, that's where I live. That's where I'm comfortable.
Okay, good. Now let's go to the next slide, and you'll find this even more revealing, I think. So here are the 4 quadrants now. The upper, the D, and the I are the outgoing. And the lower, the C and the S, or the S and the C, we go in a clockwise motion. The S and the C are the more reserved. The D and C are more task-oriented, and the I and S are more people-oriented. So as you look at those words, I'm thinking that, okay, maybe Natalie, you would be, I don't know if you can see my cursor. No, you can't, because this is her screen. Okay, the C down there, it sounds like you're more of a C or a D, task-oriented, but well, no, and you're also more reserved. So yours is a C. You want to do a good job. The word calculating there does not mean calculating in the sense of trying to do something bad, but just being conscious of weighing all the options and carefully calculating what should be done. C's are wonderful people. They're cautious, they're competent. If you want a job done, give it to a C. That person will bend over backwards to give you a good job. The D type, well, they're the outgoing, but very task-oriented, and they are direct. Someone said they talk to you like a Dutch uncle. I mean, they just, they can come at you, and they seem really, really strong, but they're driven, they're determined, they're a doer, they're going to be active. They are, if they give you a job, they're going to come back and say, okay, what have you done? I want to know. And they're going to, they're going to be somewhat demanding. Now the I type, they're just great people. All of these are great people. The I type, well, they're inspiring. They're the ones that influence people. They are the ones that you just want to follow because you enjoy being with them. Someone said the eyes don't ever go to a party. They are the party. They're the ones that everybody wants to be around. They're the ones that when they walk into the room, all of a sudden, there's just laughter that's, they're interested in people. And the S type, well, they are supportive, and they're the steady. They're the ones that are, if you need a shoulder to cry on, the S people are the people to go to. They're going to be stable, they're sweet, they're sensitive, they care about your feelings. Now, let me back up and say, okay, if you see into one of these categories and you get words and you say, well, that's probably more me, and boy, it's definitely spouse, or that is definitely my supervisor, or whatever, that's okay. In the disc pattern, and you can see the disc going clockwise there, this is not a tool to label people, it's a tool to understand them. It's not a tool to box them in and say, well, he's a D and he's going to be that way. No, it's a tool to say he's a D. And so he has a driven personality. He is going to be strong in doing whatever he's doing. Okay, now that I understand that, I can better deal with that, and I can better modulate my communication with him to speak his language in a way. This is not an excuse. This is not, okay, I'm a C, live with it. No, this is rather a way of saying, okay, I'm a C, but you're an I. And you like to have fun. You like to be active and effervescent and all of that. Okay, that's not my nature, but I want to communicate with you. I want to have a relationship with you. So I'm going to adapt my communication so that I could speak your language. It is also a recognition of some of the weak points that we may have. Let's look at the D's. For example, the D can be dominant. I honestly prefer the word driven, but direct. They can be demanding. And if the personality is out of control, they can be defiant. An example, well, who do you think might be an example in our culture today of a D? I'm surprised no one has said Donald J. Trump. He is a D with a big capital and a big red circle around it. Like him or don't like him, that's not the issue, but understand where he's coming from. And he, unfortunately, has the attitude, I'm a D, live with it. He does not seek to modify his communication, but he is a D. He sees the end result, and it doesn't matter what it takes to get there. That's what he's going to aim for. Good, bad, or indifferent. He is a D. Now, look at the I. They're the ones, they're the inspiring ones. They influence people, not because of their arguments, but because they just inspire people to follow them. Heard soldiers talk about their captain, that we would have followed him, forgive the term, to hell and back, because he inspired us. Okay, that is beautiful, and they love interaction. My younger sister is an I. When people would move into the neighborhood at the end, when we were kids, at the end of the first day, I would know we've got new neighbors. They have 3 kids because I saw them walk in the house. They have a dog. My sister would know who they were, their names, all 3 kids, and the dog. And she would know where they came from, what kind of job they had. She would know all of that because she, that was just her. Another thing to recognize is that none of us is pure D or I or S or C. We're all blends. I, for example, am an SC with a touch of I. That is, I really do like the status quo. I like things calm. I'm going to be steady. I'm not going to jump out, but I want things done correctly. But I like to have fun too. Okay? And none of us is a pure anything. All of us have a blend in there in differing proportions. Now, when the I is out of control, he or she can become illogical. And they can just, they can just do things that are nonsensical. But perhaps one example of an I would be Oprah Winfrey. And she just attracts people. She's just inspiring. Not because of her arguments, arguments in the sense of a debate, but because of her personality. She's just inspiring. The S type, supportive, steady, they're stable, they're sweet. When it's out of control, the S's can be suckers. They can just get taken for a ride very, very easily. And I can testify to that. But a good example of suckers, not of suckers, but of the S's would be Mr. Rogers. If you have not seen the movie, by the way, of Mr. Rogers, or The Neighborhood, I think is the title of the movie, it talks about the relationship of Mr. Rogers with a reporter. And it is beautiful to see the effect that Mr. Rogers has. And he's never pushy. He's just, he's just him. He's just supportive. He's helpful. And to see the cautious folks, they're the ones that, really don't know. They go into a new restaurant, they're going to be the slowest one in choosing a meal because there's so many choices and they don't know which ones to choose and they don't want to make a mistake. And, so they're going to take their time. And if we understand that, we can make it a point to ask everyone else first what meal they want and then come to them. That way all of us won't be held up. And that's okay. That's okay. That's just their nature. And we try, but they're going to be careful. They're going to be contemplative. If it's out of control, a C can be cold or can be perceived as being cold, that they're just uncaring. And that's not really the case. An example of a C personality might be Martha Stewart. It's just going to be, she's thought this through. This is the way it is, and they're going to be consistent. Okay, now when you said I am more the inside and I'm more task oriented, that means you're probably a D. But then Heather, I remember you mentioned I'm task oriented and I'm more outgoing, but I also love people. So I would probably be willing to bet that you are either a D/I or an I/D, probably a D/I. That is, I is your primary secondary trait, and it's a strong one, but the D is probably the principal one. Does that sound like you?
I am looking at it, and I'm pretty heavy in the I because people just tend to follow wherever I lead, and I am the party. So, but I also see some D traits also. I would say more I and then
interesting. Well, that's good. That's a beautiful combination, because if people are working with you, they know they're going to enjoy it and they're going to accomplish the job at the same time. Dana, as you looked at it, you said you were more reserved. It says my internet connection is unstable. I hope you can still follow.
Yes.
Okay. More reserved. And did you say more task oriented? I'm sorry, I've forgotten now.
Yes.
Okay. Well, as you look at those descriptive words, where do you place yourself?
I will see. I feel like I'm a SC with a little sprinkle of an I now and then, but I'm a SC.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. That's terrific. Because people that are working with you, they're going to know someone they can count on, because you're steady. You aren't going to go off on some tangent, but you're going to be careful about what you do. You're going to make sure there's a good job done. And that's a terrific colleague to have, believe me. Rachel, where would you place yourself, do you think?
Probably,
Again, you're not walking for life here.
yeah. It's okay. S with maybe just a little bit of D, determined and kind of know what I want.
Yeah.
Probably an SD.
Okay. And that is terrific. Again, the people know you are going to be there for them in any situation. But they also know, hey, we've got a job to do. And they know she's got my back, but we're going to work. And that's terrific. That is great. Natalie, you're down here amongst the reserved people like me. Where would you put yourself, you think?
I am for sure a C with a little bit of I. Any of my outgoing is with people. People are always surprised to hear that I'm a reserved person, because I can kind of turn it on if I have to and become interactive. But the C is very heavy. I loved your analogy with the picking the food out, because I'm notorious for it, to the point where I really just usually order 2 meals because I can't decide. And so I just get, I promise you, I will get like 2 full meals at a dinner, because I don't want to miss out on anything. And I'm like, no, I want a little bit of this and this, I'll just get 2.
Okay,
so
good.
that struck a chord.
Yeah, well, I'm in the same, I always let Judy go first. And basically whatever she orders, I order. Because again, I don't want to miss out. And I know that she usually makes good choices. So that's what I do. Okay, I'm taking longer on this than I had really thought I would. But let's go on to this. Now, as you look at that, can you see colleagues? Can you see your kids? Where do you see your kids? Now,
Jackson is definitely a D.
Jackson's a D.
Jackson's definitely a D.
He's the older.
Yes, he's the oldest.
Yeah.
I'm undetermined about a lot of things about Lydia, since she's only 7.
Yeah, that's a little early.
And now Nathan is just a C through and through, but he can have a little bit of D when it comes to his job, but he is really likes to think things through. If I need an answer about something.
Yeah, you want that in a detective.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. But like something at home, if I'm needing an answer about something and we have to make a decision, I know I'm never going to get an answer right away. So I'll like prepare him like a week or 2 ahead of time. We're really going to need to decide about X, Y, or Z, because he needs time to process it. So it's
exactly.
I'll have to think about Zane, because I'm not really sure about him. He's a little bit more reserved.
Okay. Hey, interestingly, the D's are about 10% of the population. The I's are somewhere, I've got it here, somewhere close to 30%. The C's are, they're going to do it right. They're 25%, practically dead on. 25%, and the supportive, the S's are about 35% of the population. And we all thank the Lord that the D's are only 10%. I'm kidding. Rachel, where do you put your kids?
My oldest one for sure is a D. So I see a lot of that in him. Liam, he is probably a CS for sure. So yeah.
And so if you were proposing something to the two of them, you would expect your older one to respond immediately. This is what I want to do. And Liam, he's gonna, as Heather said, he's got to have time to process it.
Yes, and Natalie, he's kind of like you. When we go to eat, we know that he's going to be the last one, and eating is a big deal. Yeah, because he doesn't know, or maybe is a lot of things. He says maybe a lot, so we're trying to work through that. Because I'm not sure that's a real answer. I don't know. I'm struggling with that as a parent. Maybe. So I try to. My oldest one influences my younger one a lot because he knows exactly what he wants, and he's going to take everyone with him. So
absolutely. Hey, yeah, come on, follow me. We'll make it happen. Dana, where do you put your kids?
My oldest is an S, and my youngest is a C. The youngest, she likes to know what's going to happen before it's happening, and I keep her. She's my little task keeper. She'll be like, "Mommy, don't forget you have a doctor appointment on Thursday." I'm like, Layla, why are you telling me about something that's 72 hours later? She wants to make sure her work is turned in on time. She wants to make sure her papers are crisp in her folder, no bins or anything like that. She's careful with people's emotions. And then Haley, which is my eldest, she's definitely an S. She's status quo. She kind of just go with the flow. She is sensitive. But yeah.
Yeah. And Natalie? And then I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, my oldest, Boston, is a lot like me. He's a C, but he's very sensitive, so he has that S in it. So it's interesting. We're a lot alike, but whereas I'm very unemotional, he's very emotional. So we tend to butt heads on things like that. My middle son, who is autistic, strangely enough, is my eye. That kid, and Dana can attest to this, everyone loves him. You just surround yourself with this sweet spirit that he has. And
he's like a little people magnet.
He is, and I hear it all the time. He's just a joy. And then my youngest, pray for me, is a D, exactly like my husband is a D. My husband is a D, and he is a D. So I've got two of them in my household. And oh my goodness. Now, my husband has kind of figured out, he's, in business and in everything, he handles it well. Whereas my youngest is still figuring out his emotions. So he falls into that defiant category more often than not.
Yeah. I would say he's determined, Natalie. He's determined.
He's determined to make me go crazy most days.
I hear you. Okay, our time has almost run out, and I've already infringed on Natalie's time to wrap up. If you can show the one next slide, I think, Natalie, and I will then turn it over to you. No style is more desirable than any other. No style is less desirable. And I repeat again, all of us are a blend. But if we can understand ourselves and understand our kids, our colleagues, our spouses, it greatly contributes. Because if I know I've got a child who is a D, that means I need to speak in a certain way. And if the child is an S, I don't dare speak to them in the same way because it'll just crush them. If it's a C, I want to make sure I've got, all the, everything in line. And if it's an I, hey, let's just go outside and have fun and talk, and they'll be happy, and they will receive it. So I find this just extraordinarily helpful, and I hope the discussion's been good for you. And Natalie, I apologize for taking so much of the time.
There we go. You are fine. I do want to, so we spoke at the beginning about what type of learner you are. I am a visual learner. And I know for me, because, you know, we talked about it yesterday, we're spending so much time with our family. I plan on kind of having a printout, putting it on the fridge, and we're all these different types. So it's kind of a visual reminder of how to deal with each other, where we may butt heads. So I encourage you to find a way to just remember those styles. And it's so hard sometimes when you're kind of in the moment itself. But I think it's so important for us to look outside the moment and really understand everyone's styles.
If I may say one word, anyone watching afterwards, contact me. My address is there. I'll be happy to talk with you and work through this with you in greater detail.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And then, again, this session is being recorded and it's going to be available on YouTube next week. We'll have all the sessions there. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about how we're going to navigate this summer and getting kids ready for the next school year. Even though we don't know what that's going to look like yet, it's still, I think we can all use some help as we're getting into this summer. And I know for myself, a lot of our summer activities have been canceled, and I'm, you know, currently dealing with the emotions of that. My youngest just cried that he hates the coronavirus because because Build-A-Bear is not open right now. So it's difficult. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. I've got Robert's email address as well as mine if anyone wants to reach out and questions. And I want to open it up to everyone on here. Does anyone have any questions, any clarity, anything that you took away from it that you really want to leave others with? Because I think we're all helping each other here.
I would like to add something that could be an additional tool that would help identify, in addition to the personality types, if you have not done love language quiz with your kids, they have a version for children that you can ask them questions, and that is a game changer. So if you understand how they receive love, then it really makes a difference in how you can discipline or encourage or make their day. So that's something that is a big deal in our house.
That's such a good tip. Love languages are, I'm telling you, when my husband and we did a marriage retreat very early in our marriage, and we found out each other's love languages, and that is a game changer because so often we're trying to talk to people using our love language and not theirs. And so it's such a help. And yeah, you can see, I can always see it on my kids. I'm like, oh, his is physical touch. And it really is a great tool. That's a great point, Heather.
And so you can do it free online. You can just go to the 5 love languages and it gives you a choice if you're a single person or if you're married or if you're a child or teen. So there's different quizzes based on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's really good. And there's also I don't think they have a kid version one, but if you do like these personality assessments, I always find them really useful. I encourage you, along with this personality type, look at your Enneagram, because wow, I did it when I first got hired here, actually. And it was funny because I got hired and Joshua said, I think you're a type 3. And sure enough, it was dead on.
Funny.
I was like, yep, I am. But yeah, these are all really, really good tips. And I think that personality styles are helpful. I think they're needed. Does anyone have anything else that they'd like to add? All right, I think that we will call this. Thank you guys, everyone, for joining us live, joining us later on YouTube. I appreciate it. And we will be doing this again tomorrow at 9 a.m. using the same Zoom link. So I will hopefully see you all then.